The educational outlook is rather misty and depressing both at home and abroad. That science should be a staple of education, that the teaching of Latin, of modern languages, of mathematics must be reformed, that nature and handicrafts should be pressed into service for the training of the eye and hand, that boys and girls must learn to write English and therefore must know something of history and literature, and on the other hand, that education must be made more technical and utilitarian. These and such as these are the cries of expedience with which we take the field. But we have no unifying principle, no definite aim, in fact, no philosophy of education. As a stream can rise no higher than its source, so it is probable that no educational effort can rise above the whole scheme of thought which gives it birth. And perhaps this is the reason of all the fallings from us, vanishings, failures, and disappointments which mark our educational records. Those of us who have spent many years in pursuing the benign and elusive vision of education perceive that her approaches are regulated by a law, and that this law has yet to be evoked. We can discern its outlines, but no more. We know that it is pervasive. There is no part of a child's home life or schoolwork which the law does not penetrate. It is illuminating, too, showing the value, or lack of value, of 1,000 systems and expedients. It is not only a light, but a measure, providing a standard whereby all things, small and great, belonging to the educational work must be tested. The law is liberal, taking in whatsoever things are true, honest, and of good report, and offering no limitation or hindrance, save where excess should injure. And the path indicated by the law is continuous and progressive, with no transition stage from cradle to the grave, except that maturity takes up the regular self-direction to which immaturity has been trained. We shall doubtless find, when we apprehend the law, that certain German thinkers, Kant, Herbart, Lotze, Froebel, are justified, that, as they say, it is necessary to believe in God, that therefore the knowledge of God is the principal knowledge and the chief end of education. Such a theory of education, which need not be careful to call itself a system of psychology, must be in harmony with the thought movements of the age, must regard education not as a shut-off compartment, but as being as much a part of life as birth or growth, marriage or work, and it must leave the pupil attached to the world at many points of contact. It is true that educationalists are already eager to establish such contact in several directions, but their efforts rest upon an axiom here and an idea there, and there is no broad unifying basis of thought to support the whole. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread, and the hope that there may be many tentative efforts towards a philosophy of education, and that all of them will bring us nearer to the magnum opus, encourages me to launch one such attempt. The central thought, or rather body of thought, upon which I found is the somewhat obvious fact that the child is a person with all the possibilities and powers included in personality. One thesis, which is perhaps new, that education is the science of relations, appears to me to solve the question of a curriculum, as showing that the object of education is to put a child in living touch with as much as may be of the life of nature and thought. Add to this one or two keys to self-knowledge, and the educated youth goes forth with some idea of self-management, with some pursuits and many vital interests. My excuse for venturing to offer a solution, however tentative and passing, to the problem of education is twofold. For between 30 and 40 years I have labored without pause to establish a working and philosophic theory of education, and in the next place, each article of the educational faith I offer has been arrived at by inductive processes, and has, I think, been verified by a long and wide series of experiments. It is, however, with sincere diffidence that I venture to offer the results of this long labor, because I know that in this field there are many laborers far more able and expert than I, the angels who fear to tread, so precarious is the footing. But, if only pour encourager la sorte, I append a short synopsis of the educational theory advanced in the volumes of the Home Education series. The treatment is not methodic but incidental. I should add that in the course of a number of years, the various essays have been prepared for the use of the Parents' Educational Union in the hope that that society might witness for a more or less coherent body of educational thought. Quote, "The consequence of truth is great, therefore judgment of it must not be negligent." End quote, by Whichcote. 1. Children are born persons. 2. They are not born either good or bad, but with possibilities for good and evil. 3. The principles of authority on the one hand and obedience on the other are natural, necessary, and fundamental. But, number 4, these principles are limited by the respect due to the personality of children, which must not be encroached upon, whether by fear or love, suggestion or influence, or undue play upon any one natural desire. 5. Therefore, we are limited to 3 educational instruments: the atmosphere of environment, the discipline of habit, and the presentation of living ideas. 6. By saying education is an atmosphere, it is not meant that a child should be isolated in what may be called a child environment, especially adapted and prepared, but that we should take into account the educational value of his natural home atmosphere, both as regards persons and things, and should let him live freely among his proper conditions. It stultifies a child to bring down his world to a child's level. 7. By education as a discipline is meant the discipline of habits formed definitely and thoughtfully, whether habits of mind or body. Physiologists tell us of the adaptation of brain structure to habitual lines of thought, i.e., to our habits. 8. In the saying that education is a life, the need of intellectual and moral, as well as of physical sustenance, is implied. The mind feeds on ideas, and therefore children should have a generous curriculum. 9. But the mind is not a receptacle into which ideas must be dropped, each idea adding to an apperception mass of its like, the theory upon which the Herbartian doctrine of interest rests. 10. On the contrary, a child's mind is no mere sack to hold ideas, but is rather, if the figure may be allowed, a spiritual organism with an appetite for all knowledge. This is its proper diet, with which it is prepared to deal, and which it can digest and assimilate as the body does foodstuffs. 11. This difference is not a verbal quibble. The Herbartian doctrine lays the stress of education, the preparation of knowledge in enticing morsels presented in due order, upon the teacher. Children taught upon this principle are in danger of receiving much teaching with little knowledge, and the teacher's axiom is, what a child learns matters less than how he learns it. 12. But, believing that the normal child has powers of mind that fit him to deal with all knowledge proper to him, we must give him a full and generous curriculum, taking care only that the knowledge offered to him is vital, that is, that facts are not presented without their informing ideas. Out of this conception comes the principle that 13, education is the science of relations, that is, that a child has natural relations with a vast number of things and thoughts, so we must train him upon physical exercises, nature, handicrafts, science and art, and upon many living books. For we know that our business is not to teach him all about anything, but to help him to make valid as many as may be of those first-born affinities that fit our new existence to existing things. 14. There are also 2 secrets of moral and intellectual self-management which should be offered to children. These we may call the way of the will and the way of the reason. 15. The way of the will. Children should be taught A. To distinguish between I want and I will. B. That the way to will effectively is to turn our thoughts from that which we desire but do not will. C. That the best way to turn our thoughts is to think of or do some quite different thing, entertaining or interesting. D. that after a little rest in this way, the will returns to its work with new vigor. This adjunct of the will is familiar to us as diversion, whose office it is to ease us for a time from will effort, that we may will again with added power. The use of suggestion, even self-suggestion, as an aid to the will is to be deprecated as tending to stultify and stereotype character. It would seem that spontaneity is a condition of development, and that human nature needs the discipline of failure as well as of success. 16. The way of the reason. We should teach children not to lean too confidently unto their own understanding, because the function of reason is to give logical demonstration, A, of mathematical truth, and B, of the initial idea accepted by the will. In the former case, reason is perhaps an infallible guide, but in the second it is not always a safe one, for whether that initial idea be right or wrong, reason will confirm it by irrefragable proofs. 17. Therefore, children should be taught, as they become mature enough to understand such teaching, that the chief responsibility which rests on them as persons is the acceptance or rejection of initial ideas. To help them in this choice, we should give them principles of conduct and a wide range of the knowledge fitted for them. These three principles, 15, 16, and 17, should save children from some of the loose thinking and heedless action which cause most of us to live at a lower level than we need. 18. We should allow no separation to grow up between the intellectual and spiritual life of children, but should teach them that the Divine Spirit has constant access to their spirits and is their continual helper in all the interests, duties, and joys of life.